Welcome back to the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs, and our conversation continues now with Douglas C. Brown, voiceover talent as well as longtime radio production director on many stations in Southern California. Now, before we left last time, I teased people about you talking about the fifth Beatle in Los Angeles. We're talking about Dave Hull, the Hullabluer. When you listened to Dave Hull back in the 1960s, for a while he actually owned a club in Hollywood on Sunset, and that location eventually became the Aquarius Theater, then the Star Search Theater, and then Nickelodeon on Sunset. I think it's back to the name Aquarius Theater. How many times did you visit Dave Hull's Hullabaloo Club on Sunset?
Well, just to set the record straight, Dave didn't own it.
Oh, okay.
He did license his name to it. And the interesting thing is that the guy who was managing it was a guy named Gary Bucasta, who went on to be the founder of KROQ-AM. Small world, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, so, yeah, he licensed that, Dave's name, and Dave, did lend his endorsement to it, as it were. So the only time I remember going to concerts at the was billed as the Aquarius in '67. I remember seeing Doors there, and I saw Janis Joplin and Big Brother and the Holding Company, and I saw their production. They did a production of Tommy, the musical. The Who weren't there, but it was a musical theater version of Tommy, which played in there, and I saw Hair in there as well. I saw Hair. Yeah, that was the first time I went there, which had to be in, I think that was like late '69. Let's see, Hair in there. Yeah, when that was the Earl Carroll Theater, that was a pretty cool room, and it had that famous rotating stage, which meant if you had a rock band or two playing, they could both be set up on different halves of this circular stage. So when it came time to change sets, it took very minimal time because it wasn't like you had to schlep a bunch of amps onto the stage and move a drum set and all this stuff. They would just turn this circular stage 180 degrees, and the band that used to be backstage is now front stage, right? And so that was really a cool room. It was, and of course, that's where the old Queen for a Day TV show originated from. And actually, one of those video productions that was played theatrically was recorded there. The one called not the Tammy Show. It was the follow-up to the Tammy Show. The Tammy Show was their first production of its kind with a whole bunch of rock bands recorded on video for projection in a theater. That was recorded at the Santa Monica Civic. But the follow-up was the Great TNT or the Big TNT Show. That was recorded, what was the Earl Carroll and then the Aquarius and the Hullabaloo Club. That was really an interesting space for that. That's an interesting show if you haven't seen that. There is a DVD out there of the Tammy Show and the Big TNT Show together on one Blu-ray box. And it's really a trip. There's some really interesting performances from James Brown to the Byrds, the Rolling Stones, to Joan Baez sitting at a piano with Phil Spector. I mean, it's a trip. That's well worth. If you're into '60s music scene, that DVD of TNT and Tammy Show is well worth having. There's bonus material too on there of the director and people talking about the event. So that was cool. So did I ever go to the club when Dave had his name on it? No, I didn't, although I was very aware of it. And they had a lot of name acts playing in there, from the Turtles to Paul Revere and the Raiders, and those kind of people went through the Hullabaloo. I know I've seen a lot of their print ads. I still have a collection of some of the KRLA Beat newspapers. And there's always print ads in there for the acts appearing at the Hullabaloo or the Whiskey A Go-Go or whatever.
There's a hilarious print ad in the KRLA Beat of Dave Hull's Dave Hull, quote, borrowing a jacket from Paul Revere. And he's running off the stage, stealing the jacket from Paul Revere in the photograph. It's this looks like such a fun club,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Dave was into all that silly stuff, his famous junkie float that he had people build for the Hollywood Christmas parade. That was freaking amazing. Yeah.
Did you send anything in for the junk float by chance?
No, but I was very aware of it. And, I was definitely a fan. And this is interesting because, KHJ launched in May of '65, and that was right before I graduated from high school. So I was really a very loyal KRLA listener, maybe KFWB to a certain extent, but I was really a KRLA listener up until that time. So I remember when KHJ came on the air, I thought, wow, this is really different. And why is that guy in Afternoon Drive yelling at me? That would be the response Steele. I mean, compared to what KRLA was at the time, it was kind of shocking. Obviously, it was a huge success, and Steele was a classic. But I remember my first reaction as a teenager hearing Steele for the first time is, why is he yelling? What's the deal? Boy, he was the best at it. But the fact that real Don Steele is not in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame or something is just wrong.
That's a shocker to me, right? I did not know that. That is definitely wrong because it's like, come on, if anybody's listening from the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, put the real Don Steele there. That guy was larger than life. He was one of the reasons I got into radio. I never did meet him, but I did meet his wife, Sean. In fact, she gave me my first paying gig in radio, so I'm eternally grateful for that. And but yeah, I can't believe he's not in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. It's just like till a couple of years ago, Gil Hodges was not in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, isn't that weird? These Hall of Fame, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's kind of you got to wonder why are some people in there and others aren't. It's
Madonna's in it, Janet Jackson's in it, but Grand Funk Railroad is not.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird. It is very, very weird politics involved, I'm sure, that I have no knowledge of. But it's nice when they do acknowledge people with, say, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame or something like that, which a few LA radio people have, which is cool,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Don had his in 1995. Wink Martindale didn't get his until about 2006. And the week before, Ryan Seacrest got his, so it was a shocker to me that Seacrest got his star before the Winker did.
Well, a lot of it has to do with lobbying, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, and also you have to have somebody show up from the family or the artist himself show up. And I understand that was kind of an interesting challenge. I mean, I remember when KNX-FM Part 2 was underway, we were lobbying to get John Lennon a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and eventually we were part of the lobbying. I wouldn't say it was exclusively KNX-FM doing it, but we did lobby that, and eventually Cynthia Lennon showed up. So that was cool. She came by the station. I got to meet her, and that was nice. They have to have the right people showing up to make a big deal out of it, So Brian Byrne and Steele and these guys and Gary Owens and all these people, they all deserve to be there, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If they weren't part of Hollywood, who was,
Well, speaking of Gary Owens, you got to work at KJQI, KJoy, 1260, 540, Mount Wilson Broadcasters. How closely did you work with Gary? You also had Chuck Southcott and Wink Martindale there as well.
Yeah, I did. That was after I had operated the AM and FM up in Monterey, Salinas, Santa Cruz for Saul Levine, who is indeed Mount Wilson Broadcasters. It's his company. When he decided to do something different with that AM and FM up there in the Central Coast, he said, well, why don't you help Chuck Southcott out here, and we'll take this AM 1260, the former KGIL, and turn it into KJoy, doing, music for your life. What was it called? Music?
Yeah, Music of Your Life. Mm-hmm.
Music of Your Life, right, for lack of a better term. I mean, people used to joke. I remember Robert W. Morgan used to call it music for what's left of the rest of your life. But that was kind of rude, but that was totally like Robert W. That's what he would say.
He was very sarcastic on the air, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like Chuck Southcott a lot, and I helped him out with the music scheduling software that I had been pretty familiar with, running my the thing up in Northern California was called the Quake, K-Q-K-E, the Quake. Mm-hmm. And so I had was very familiar with the music scheduling software, so I helped him with that for KJoy, and we got to cut some Johnny Mann jingles, so I got to go to that session and watch that whole thing. So we ended up with a nice little Johnny Mann package for that, but that didn't last very long either, and I'm not sure why Saul Levine didn't stay with that format, but he's taken that AM 1260 through about 19 different formats. Seems like it changes.
Yeah, it's like the format of the Month Club almost. Now it's AM classical, and it sounds terrible. I'm like, classical and AM just does not. I wish they'd kept the oldies format because it was actually pretty good at the beginning there, and it was serving an audience that wasn't, well, serving a format that was no longer on FM, because the, K Earth 101 is now basically a touch of 70s and 80s and 90s.
Yeah, K-Earth, of course, has lost all the Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly and all that stuff. Sure, all that's long gone. But they're smart. They've aged along with their audience, and that's why they're number one in the market.
Exactly. I mean, Johnny K. Brought it to the 1960s and 70s sounds and did a really good job there about 20 years ago when he became the program director. And then after Johnny left, they had another program director who really wasn't that good, but then he was replaced quickly with Chris Abbott, who got back on track going into the 80s and now 90s. And like you said, it's got a great lineup of DJs. Couple of them, one of them I actually worked with for about 9 years, Lara Scott. She's a sweetheart and a great jock in midday. And you got Gary Bryan, who's been there for 21 years. And so you got a winning combination there with the music and the DJs, and Greg Sims also.
Yeah, it's a very select format. There's no doubt about it, and it's obviously proven itself to be very much in tune with their audience. And with the portable people meters out there too, it's interesting to me. Where people aren't. Back in the day, people used to keep physical diaries. Mm-hmm. They write down what they're listening, and you could always find errors in those diaries, and people would fill them out without actually listening and such. But the portable people meters, of course, with the digital monitoring, made it very easy for Nielsen to come up with accurate numbers. But what's interesting to me is a station like K-Earth, is on in stores a lot. It's one of those things you can leave on that makes everybody happy pretty much. You won't get complaints running K-Earth on your public address. And so I'm thinking of the people with portable people meters walking in and out of stores. Mm-hmm. They're being registered as K-Earth listeners, even though they may not even be aware of what they're listening to. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And this particularly comes true, it seems to me, when Coast does their Christmas thing. Coast ends up being on, I don't know what it's about 80% of the retail stores I walk into in December, right? And so their numbers go through the freaking roof. And I can't help but think that it's because the portable people meters are on people's belts or in their purses or wherever, and they're coming in and out of these stores, and they may not even be aware of what they're listening to, but it gets counted. So it shows up on the Nielsen, and I think that, I was at the Department of Motor Vehicles down here in Orange County one day, and there was, there must have been 250 people waiting to get, whatever business they were going to get it done. And they had K-Earth on the overhead on the PA, which was constantly being interrupted by the announcer, come to window 15B, blah, blah, blah. The DMV announcer, the DMV staff, not the K-Earth announcer.
Oh, yeah.
But so K-Earth was on, and I'm thinking most of these people aren't even listening to this thing. They can't even really hear it. It's on such a low level that you wouldn't even notice it, right? And I'm thinking, how many portable people meters are in this room right now being registered as, quote, listeners? And I think that's really interesting to me because, you wonder if advertisers are making their decisions basically primarily on the Nielsen numbers, you wonder, especially with 3 and 4 and 5 minute stop sets, how many of these commercials are actually being listened to. So I know it's a numbers game.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about, but it intrigues me that the people don't have to be active listeners to be listeners. They can be very passive listeners, being just exposed to it in a store or a public place or, something, which is part of modern technology. And it's great to have more reliable numbers and have people keeping diaries that are either faked or wrong or all that stuff.
Yeah, trying to I forgot to fill it out. Let me just do it right now. And it was inaccurate. In fact, they found out that most formats actually had more listeners than previously thought. I think there were just 2 formats that had fewer listeners when the Arbitron, or the Arbitron, now Nielsen, came out with the portable people meter. So I thought that was a good thing in there, but there were still some people complaining about it as discriminatory. But it's like, wait a minute, just about every format has more listeners than you thought, but it's actually spread out a little bit more than they thought as well, as far as listenership is concerned. But I guess with meters, it's kind of a random sample, like a poll is. So you're not going to get exactly accuracy. Internet radio or listens on the internet are accurate because the computer can accurately track how many listeners it actually gets, or the app how many listeners it actually gets. So that is an accurate form of things. But just radio will never be completely accurate unless every single car has some sort of sensor in it to say exactly what it has, and that would be a little bit of a violation of privacy that people are like, I don't know if I want to do that. This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. We're talking with Douglas C. Brown, radio production director for many stations in Southern California, as well as a voiceover talent. And next time, Doug talks with us about a project that's a labor of love. It's an online recreation of a legendary FM station in Southern California. We'll find out what radio station that is next time.